felt totally burned out, even if you have been crushing your goals, you're not alone. On today's show, I am joined by a man who built a multiple seven-figure financial agency through sheer grit. And then he hit a breaking point and just shut down. In this episode, he shares the wake-up call that made him question everything, from his hustle-heavy mindset to his definition of success. He went from numbing out on the couch with TV and alcohol to running multiple businesses in under 20 hours a week. We get into the patterns that keep people stuck, the power of aligned action, not perfection, but alignment, the subtle blocks that can hold you back, and the daily shifts that will help you build wealth without sacrificing yourself, your freedom, or your family in the process. Whether you are building a business, craving more purpose, or you're just ready to stop running on empty, this episode will help you redefine success on your terms. Stay tuned. Welcome to Shift or Get Off the Pot, the podcast that helps you get out of your head and into action so you can make your dreams your reality. Let's get to it. For any of you who own your own business, maybe you're self-employed, maybe you have dreamt of starting a business, or maybe you're in sales, you are going to love today's episode because my guest built a seven-figure financial advising and insurance agency, but he did it the hard way. He did it with a lot of hustle, long hours, and a lot of personal sacrifice until he realized that there was a much better, much more aligned way. And now he runs multiple successful businesses in less than 20 hours a week. He is a high performance coach. He is a speaker, an author of a soon to be released book, and he is the founder of The Aligned Entrepreneur, where he now works with 6- and 7-figure business owners, helping them to create more income with far less freedom. I mean, far more freedom, actually. Far more freedom and far more fulfillment as well. So welcome to the show, Ben Spangl.
Thank you, Kim. So good to be with you. I have to say, you have a beautiful podcast voice. I love it.
Thank you. I love doing this because I love hearing other people's stories. I like to hear what, has really helped them in their lives and what has not only inspired them, but just helped them to make some changes so that they can live the life that they truly want. Because I'm a firm believer, as are you, that we have so much potential that we don't typically tap into for whatever reason. So I would love to hear from you about building that business, because I do know quite a few other people that have built very successful businesses, but like you, they have given up something in order to do that. There's been something that has just, maybe made them hit burnout, complete burnout or frustration, or they've lost maybe their marriage, their family, something. So what was it for you that made you just say, okay, something's got to give here?
For me, it was, I think for a lot of people, it's the same where there's early stage signs that maybe you ignore and you don't pay attention to. That was the case for me. So for me, it was burnout. Very fortunate. I didn't lose my marriage. I didn't lose my family, anything like that. I didn't lose my health. But I had reached a place where what I now know as burnout, and some people say I'm burned out, but I think unless you've really gone through a real burnout, everyone's going to be a bit different, but we really don't know what that's like until it happens. And for me, what it was, I've always been a high performer. I've always been a guy that gets stuff done, makes things happen. And here I was in the spring of 2020, I guess it would have been. I had just come off the single greatest year of my business and career, made more money than I ever made in my lifetime. I mean, we were able to, with money brings things, of course, that you can enhance your lifestyle. And so we've been able to do that and save and travel and all this kind of stuff. But then here I was where I was the most apathetic, withdrawn version of me that I've ever been in my life. I hope to never, ever experience that again, where I just truly did not care. Um, I did what was whatever on my calendar. But in terms of, from a business standpoint, in terms of doing anything to actually reach out and encourage others and uplift, and there was none of that. I would pretty much just come from finishing the day and just plop in front of the TV. I mean, it was hell. It really sucked.
Yeah.
So I reached that. So that was my starting point to beginning to really pivot in my life. Although it took a little time after that, but that was the starting point of it, was reaching a real burnout.
Yeah, just a complete low, I would imagine, a little bit depressed, and then just saying,
Yeah.
okay, I've been going through the motions day in and day out. Do
Yeah.
you think it's just that you got bored with it? That it was like, I've been doing this for so long, man, I need a switch.
No, I don't think it was that. I think it was two things. The burnout was going from, so I already had a busy life and busy business, everything. And then we went from everything that I did, in the financial business was all face to face. So, I had a fairly busy calendar where I do 3, 4, 5 meetings a day. Now, all of a sudden, we're in the middle of the pandemic and everything's virtual. So I went from 3, 4, 5 meetings to 10 to 12 meetings a day because I could, right? So part of the burnout was purely just overload, zero breaks, just being stupid about it. But then there was this hidden part of it that ended up being, as most of these things do in our lives, one of the greatest blessings of my life, because the hidden part was, I can see now how there was a part of me that purposely went down that path to begin to reevaluate. I was ignoring a part of me that knew I was meant for something different than what I had been doing, that I was called for something different than what I had been doing. So I think it was a higher orchestration of a way to get me to wake up a bit, and some pain that was necessary in order to begin to shift. So the combination of those two things.
Yeah, a blessing in
Yeah.
disguise. But I want to address that for a moment,
Mm.
because you said I was ignoring something that I knew I was meant to do, something else, a higher calling. And yet I think a lot of us do that. I mean, I know I certainly did that too, but I think a lot of us do that. But what made you realize, okay, look, there's something else here. And yeah, the money's great, but man, I just know that there's something else here. And could you identify, because here's where I think a lot of people struggle with the clarity. Could you identify what that something more, or what that other thing was?
Yeah, I always knew what it was from the very first time I ever went to a convention. So I was in my early 20s when I got into business, and I went to a convention of about 20,000 people. And he's a pretty prolific speaker and definitely big in the space now. Ed Milet, I heard Ed Milet speak, and I knew that one day I wanted to do that. The impact that it had on my life at 21, 22 years old. But it wasn't that I was going to go and do this for the public. It was, I was going to do that in that business. And then as things progressed, I just became obsessed with personal development and fanatical about it. And as for you, I mean, it was my biggest passion. And so almost everything that I did within that business, how I grew my own sales, how I helped lead my team, how I helped develop people, was all based around teaching these kind of concepts. So I knew exactly what I wanted to be doing, and that what the real dream was, but the ignoring was no, it's not the right time. I need to be more successful. I need to build the biggest business bigger. I need to do this. We need to get here. And yet all the delaying was with no real plan, no real time that said, okay, when I'm actually here, then I can begin. And it was always just putting off until, some magical day in the future, which, as we all know, doesn't occur.
Right.
So I knew what it was going to be.
Wow, that's interesting. I mean, well, and you're doing it though. You were doing it within your own business, but you're
Yes.
saying, okay, I want to do it on a bigger level, reach more people.
Yeah.
But you're right. If you don't have a deadline, then it's just this pipe dream. It's out there. It's like, okay, someday I'll get to that. But I think a lot of that goes back to our own belief in ourselves. Like, can I actually do this? Whether
Absolutely.
it could be worthy enough, or is it, I don't, like you said, I have to have more success under my belt.
Who's going to listen? Who's going to listen? Who's going to want to take advice? And it's funny to look back on it, right? And obviously, if you're coaching someone else, it's easy to see where that could be blocking them. But I could see in my own life and think, well, who am I to go and do that? There's people that have done so much more than what I've done. So why would they want to listen? How am I going to coach anyone like that? How am I going to? Really is it's funny because the word itself, the imposter syndrome, is not a word that really resonates super well with me. Yet at the same time, by definition, that's definitely a big thing I was experiencing.
I used to think that as well about like, okay, you have to have a certain amount of success under your belt before somebody's going to listen. Like, okay, you built this business or you excelled in sales over here. And so obviously there's some credibility there.
Right.
And that is true. I mean, I do think there is something to that. But at the same time, I've listened to so many great motivational speakers. I mean, for me, it was Les Brown early on. And I'd think, okay, Les Brown has built his business in motivational speaking. So there's no reason why you can't. It took me a long time to just grasp that concept and say, wait a minute, if that's where you shine best, why can't that be the business?
Yeah. It's so true. It's that the big difference between it's not just in the speaking business, but in anything at life is the real difference is not whether they had the credibility, they had this, they had that, is they were the ones that actually went and did. And they actually put it out there. And I don't know Les's early part of his career. But I imagine he wasn't very good when he started. Of course, he's prolific today, right? But I imagine he wasn't at the time.
Well, he kept showing up and doing it, and he started, taking over. You know what? It's one of those stories where you basically create the opportunity, because when you put yourself in a position, the opportunities will, when you believe and you start doing that and you go forward and take action, the opportunities present themselves. And for him, it was, he was a janitor, and then somebody didn't show up to be a DJ that night, and he just grabbed the mic and started doing it. And then, it snowballed and things go from there. But it's like anything else in life. You have to be willing to put yourself in that position first,
right,
before the opportunities start to show up.
Yeah.
So what was your next step then? So you've got this business, you've built a financial advising firm, you've got the insurance agency, you've got people, you've been motivating them. What was the next step for you to get yourself out of that burnout, to just sitting there and numbing yourself with TV or whatever?
Yeah, TV and booze really was what it was. I hired a coach. It took me a few months of kind of living in that hellhole, but then would have been probably June, I think, of that year. And I knew something had to change. And I'd had lots of coaches in the past. I wasn't currently working with one, but I knew something had to change. And so I was just Googling high performance coaches. And I found one, and how sometimes I didn't watch a video of hers, nothing. I just read some of her stuff and it just connected. Her name's Tiffany. My wife's name's Tiffany as well. And ended up hiring her, and it was great. We worked together for at least 6 months, maybe even longer. Maybe it was a year. But it was super helpful. It helped me get out of the funk. And although it wasn't immediately, now I'm doing exactly what I knew I was meant to do with my life, it definitely helped me get out of the funk and get some of my momentum back, get some of myself back. I, was able to show up as a husband and father the way that I wanted to again. And so that's really what kickstarted kind of getting out of that.
Yeah. That's so important, because I think so often we don't realize, especially in business and especially as an entrepreneur, we're taught there's certain basic things that you have to set up, your business entity, your bank account, all those things. And then, you go out and you make the calls. You have to go out and get the business. Okay, great. But there's so many other things that go into it. And I think a big part of it is that mental component, and having somebody too that holds you accountable. Not even holds you accountable, but kind of calls you on your BS stories.
Calls you on your BS stories, questions your thinking about stuff. And I think also just helps interrupt. So to your point, calls you on some of that stuff, but helps interrupt some of the things, your patterns that are showing up. Right. So it was great. Yeah.
The patterns that are showing up, I would love to get into that for a bit, because I think that is really probably where most people have difficulties, is that there are behaviors, habits that we're not even aware of that we're doing.
Right.
So for you,
Yeah.
Did you in your own self, did you find, or did through your coach,
Mhm.
did it like all of a sudden the light was on something and you said, oh my gosh, I can so see where I've been doing that?
Hmm. Um, probably one of the biggest ones was something that where I was placing my focus on. And so I was so focused on how much things sucked at the time. And although outwardly they didn't, right? I mean,
Hmm.
everything on paper was fine. But inwardly, that's how I felt versus actually placing my focus on not just what I wanted. So I used to, in my own life, I was very goal focused. I would teach that a lot, but not just what I wanted in terms of things that I wanted to go and accomplish. More importantly, what she really helped me reframe was how did I want to feel day to day? And then to begin to create a simple system to actually start focusing on that and start generating. For me, it was alive, grateful, and inspired. These were that's what I felt was missing. I didn't feel alive. I didn't feel grateful at all. I didn't feel inspired. And so it was really helping to begin to shift my focus on that. So as I began to go into time with my kids, time with my wife, time in my business, whatever it might be, was just a simple act of asking, pardon me, how would my most alive, grateful, and inspired self do what I'm about to do, show up? And yes, it's simple. And as we both know, often the answers that work the best are the most simple. Simple doesn't always mean easy to do, right? You still have to do it. You got to implement it. But man, it made a difference to begin to
Yeah.
think about that before I went into what I was about to do, to prime my mind in a way of who I actually wanted to be in whatever situation I was about to go in. That was probably one of the biggest ones, was realizing how much I was not doing that and just kind of doing what I felt rather than choosing how I wanted to feel upfront about whatever I was about to do.
That's a great point. Distinguishing between the two. And I think when you look at business owners, when you look at people in sales, I mean, my background initially was in sales. Commission. I'd always been in commission sales until I started my businesses.
Hmm.
And honestly, it's so goal oriented.
Hmm.
But that idea of how do you want to feel in that
Hmm.
is not often spoken about, especially in business.
No,
Like, okay, here's your quota. And
right.
then can you exceed that quota?
Yep.
And you think more in terms of the dollar amount and what that
Yep.
money is
Yep.
allowing you now to do rather than an identity shift, which
Yep.
is really, I think, where all that change starts to happen.
100% it's in the identity shift. Absolutely it is. The other thing too is that in all the goal seeking, all the goal, in the pursuit of all the goals, no matter who you are and whatever goal that you say that you want, the real essence always, always, always that we're after is there's an underlying feeling that we believe if I had this in my life, I would get to experience. If I achieve this, accomplish it, then I would get to feel. Now, we may not think that, we may not, think that that's what it is, but it's always that. Now, the paradox is there's no goal that you'll ever achieve in your lifetime that's ever going to give you a lasting feeling of anything.
Mhm.
So, one of the shortcuts, I believe, to creating a greater life of fulfillment is it doesn't mean we scrap the goals. You can still have all the goals, still achieve and strive and accomplish all of that. But can we begin to focus on what is that final outcome that we're actually wanting? Not as a result, but instead of a state, instead of a feeling. Because as you mentioned, the identity, well, if I was to think of an identity, well, I did at that point in my life, I wanted to be that guy that, man, he's alive. He's
Mhm.
so inspiring. And I wanted to be that guy that was just truly grateful, not intellectually grateful. I wrote my gratitude list, but to be just truly grateful. And when we access that state, whatever that state is, it wouldn't necessarily be those three words for anyone else. But when we access the state, it's interesting that the goals that we set tend to manifest a lot quicker in our lives because we're being that version in advance rather than waiting for the goal so that we can then be that version.
Yeah, I call it creating a future, in a sense, creating a memory of a future that you haven't lived yet and
Mm,
trying to step into that, which isn't, like you said, it's not, it sounds so simple, but it isn't that easy to do because
For sure.
this is where the work comes in. This is the getting uncomfortable
Yep.
and saying, oh, it's stretching yourself. Like if you look at your bank account and you're like, oh my gosh, $50 in the bank account, but
Yep.
I see myself, this is where I want to be.
Yep.
And then as you and I both know, your subconscious is going great, but I don't care how many affirmations you say, it's
Mm-hmm.
going, that's not who you are. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's being able to kind of look at the reality. And
Mm-hmm.
this is where I think can be just an area that makes people just get tripped up on it or say, oh, personal development, I've tried that. Come on, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work. Because
Mm-hmm.
you get so caught up in this is the real fact. And
Mm-hmm.
this is what I'm dealing with on a daily basis. And if you only knew, you don't have what I have. You don't have
Mm-hmm.
the bills to pay. You don't have the
Mm-hmm.
aging parents to take care of, whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm trying to keep myself, but yet if we can go into more of, like you're saying, let's get into the feeling part of it, because it's really the feeling part of it that becomes so important
Mm-hmm.
in helping people, I think, grow and launch into what they really want to be. But
Mm-hmm.
that's the hard part. Don't you think
Yeah,
that's a little bit difficult to just say, okay, this is what I want to
it
feel
is.
like?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely it is. I mean, thinking in that way, thinking from that place, it's very hard because we're dealing with when our current reality, my life as I live it today, is nowhere near what I'm imagining that I would actually want it to be. All you see, all you hear, you taste, you smell, etc. I mean, your five senses are telling you this is what life is. So then you're trying to say, well, wait a minute. I'm actually wanting to experience this, but how? And then, of course, that analytical part of our mind's always getting caught in the how, the how, the how. And so many times in our lives, people will end up, they won't even let themselves begin to dream more because they can't see the how.
Mhm.
And I mean, part of it's just programming, part of it's just conditioning. And I think probably the biggest program that we all run is allowing our current results and reality to determine how we think and feel about our life.
Well, it's yes, 100%, because it's easy to do that. And listen, that's what most of us have been taught to do and take a look at
For
and
sure.
face the facts. You know,
Yep.
this is what it is and this is what's going to take. But like you found out, it's not all that hustle and hard
Mm,
work and long
mm,
hours. You know,
mm.
there are other ways to
Yep.
get around that. And so
Yep.
for you, when you look at this and you say, okay, I've got to make some shifts here. You
Mm,
hire a coach
mhm,
and then you go, okay, how do I want to feel? And you start leaning into that.
mhm.
Your mind would automatically go to, I would imagine, because then I've done this myself. And then your mind goes to, how am I going to get there? Oh, how am I going to get there? So,
Yeah.
how do you squash? How do you
Yeah.
squash that and kind of go, okay, look, I don't need to worry about that, because we're always told you don't have to worry about the how,
Right.
but I'm going to somehow lean into this. Was there a
Mhm.
process that you put yourself through, or that you
Mm,
now as a high performance coach that you put
mhm.
clients through?
Yeah. One thing to be, I think that's worthy of talking about too is that a lot of people that when we talk about, okay, I want to create this in my life, there's this idea, don't focus on the how. Obviously I just said that, how the how comes up and the how can become an obstacle. It's not that we don't plan on what our next moves are. It's not anything like that. Some people that are really big into law of attraction say, well, you just never have to focus on the how and only end result. And maybe, but what I found though is that it's not allowing, because you can't see how, it's not allowing that to tell you that you cannot achieve X. So instead, what is it that you're actually wanting to go and create? So before we even focus on any how whatsoever, before we do any kind of game plan whatsoever, let's get super clear on what is it that you actually want to create? How do you want to feel? And then we begin to program that in. Now, that being said, usually for people, these are not people that I'm working with that have no idea what they do in their business and they're brand new to it. And that's not what we're talking about. So people are usually pretty clear on things they could at least be doing to help them create that next level in their life. Right.
Mhm.
And for me, what ended up happening, to answer your question, was, so I got out of the funk, I got out of that, uh, and I was kind of falling back into some of these old patterns of just, okay, I want to create X in my life, so then I'm going to work and do this and do this. Then about a year later, something dramatic changed where I had my own personal, I call it my own personal awakening, where I really began to shift in terms of what I was doing for my life. I knew that I was meant to do so much more. It was so deep within me that this actually sent me on the opposite end of being a hustle, work all the time kind of guy to almost like a semi-retired, because I still was ignoring this calling, Kim. And then about 6 months later, I finally got off my ass and said, okay, I can't keep doing this. I know what I want to do. I could see it. I had this idea of the vision, the dream. Then it became, I just got to take the next step. And so the next step for me in that world was to actually run a seminar. But the next step was I just got to book a venue. Now I had the venue booked. I think it was $8,200, whatever it was, with the AV and everything. I have no people, no marketing plan, no anything. But now I've at least got that thing is booked. I'm going to fill this. I'm going to get busy and go and do it. So I don't know if I answered your question. Hopefully I did.
No, you did.
But
You set yourself up because the action step is so important. And
right.
You're right. I think it's very easy to say, oh, well, that, again, going back to, I've tried it doesn't work, because
Yeah.
we are told a lot of times, put your energy, on the thing that you really want and focus
Yeah.
on that. Right. But
Yeah.
don't get so caught up in the how. At least now there's a certain time for that, because you do have to take the action. Obviously you have to get off your
Right.
butt. You have to make the phone calls you have to do. And like you right now, then at that moment, you had some skin in the game. It's kind of like, look, I've booked a venue. I either just let it go or I show up. And
Right.
that comes down to then really, how am I going to feel about myself if I don't put some effort into it and I don't make some calls? So when you did that, did you say, okay, I know this is who I want to go after, who I want to bring into the venue, and this is the kind of talk I want to give? What was your next step from there?
So my next step for me was more, I think we all have, as we're well aware, we all have different personalities and how we work well. I work very well. Not everyone's like this, but I work very well with stuff like that. So now I've got this venue booked. Now I know I've got a specific date. I don't have a choice, right? I'm going to have to figure this out. So for me, the next step was, did some basic stuff. I was all new to online. I'd done nothing online, anything, but was just figuring out how do you actually get ticket sales for an event, so you do stuff like that. And then I just kind of did it old school. I went through my phone and I did some posts on Facebook, Instagram. Yes. But for me, it was really about just calling people and asking, here's what I've got going on. I tell them about it and then invite them to purchase a ticket. That's not the most scalable thing to go and do, but that's what I did at that time to begin to actually fill that thing. And then in terms of actually, I already knew what I wanted to talk about, generally speaking, right? It was a lot around the mind, the subconscious, law of attraction, these kind of things. That was that very first seminar I ever did. So generally, and then it was just a matter of the dates looming. And so I've got to get it done. And that works well for me. Some people are way more planners, they need to, that's not my style. My style is let's go do it. And
baptism by fire. Yeah. Jump in. Let's get it done.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I understand that, because I tend to work that way too. If there's a deadline or something that I've already put some money into, it's like, oh, you got to get on this now. You don't
That's
have,
right.
There's no turning back at this point, but
Yeah.
So, okay. So then you're bringing in people and you're talking about the mind, subconscious, programming habits. Is there anything in particular, maybe one subconscious block or limiting behavior that you have witnessed in clients, people that you've worked with, or even your own teams when you were building your business, that tends to be the main thing that gets in the way of people moving forward, taking action, having success?
Well, I think we could broadly say belief, right? We could broadly say that, if we, no matter what somebody wants, let's say someone's struggling to get themselves to do what they know they could be doing, or perhaps in their mind they should be doing to achieve this goal, to grow this business, to do whatever, but they know they're not doing that. If they really, truly, deep down in their heart of hearts, believe with absolute certainty that if I go and do this, this is going to happen in my life, then I don't believe there would be much reservation. So broadly speaking, it's we can see a vision. There's a part of us that says, yes, I can. But then there's this bigger block that says, what if it doesn't work? What if this? What if that? Of course, our paradigms. And just, it's just the ego that's conditioned in fear. So that'd be one thing. I think the other thing that really holds people back from living, especially in the business world, holds people back from living the lives that they want. Many people build businesses that make a lot of money, but they do not have a great life because they become consumed by the business. That's what had, happened to me. I mean, I've watched, tons of people do it. So again, we go back to this idea of beliefs. The way we think is so powerful. And I think that because most of us, from perhaps parents, perhaps just, cultural upbringing, whatever, most of us had the belief instilled that if you are going to be successful at anything, it's going to be a lot of work and it's going to take a long time. And when you go from an employee, let's say my hours are 9 to 5, you can still be a very hardworking employee. You could work hard in your time. Now, all of a sudden, I'm an entrepreneur. I don't have anyone that says you need to work 9 to 5. So you've got this belief system that says if you're going to be successful, you got to work super hard. Now I don't have any real, actual structural hours of what is supposed to be in my business. So to me, if I'm not working all the time, then I'm not working hard. And this becomes this internal conflict. And so if I'm not working hard, then I'm not going to be successful. And I think this becomes one of the biggest traps that most business people, not all, but most end up facing, is they're super conflicted. I was on a call with one of my one-on-one clients today. He's got a successful law firm, and we're talking about this very thing. And I said to him, we were talking about some things that he wanted to get done in his business and next steps. And so we just we were reworking some of his daily routines and habits so that he could complete what he wanted to get done. And I said, hey, David, if you were able to get blank, blank, blank done by the end of today, how would you feel about that day? And he goes, oh man, I would just love to repeat that every single day. That'd be incredible. I said, perfect. I said, tell me about the rest of your day. What do you got? He goes, I got this and I got these 3 appointments. I said, great. Do you think you could do X and X during this block? He goes, yes, I could. And then he would be done by about 3:30. And I said, okay, so hear me as I say this. When you're done at 3:30, that's a successful person. When you're done at 3:30, can you just give yourself the permission to be done for the day if you've done those other things? He goes, yeah, I can. But that was not a paradigm that was normal. Yeah. And I think that's a common one.
Well, it's pointing it out, and like your coach had done for you too. And that's why I think it's so important to have somebody else that's sitting that you can go and bounce things off of, because we don't see our own blind spots. And it's so easy to get caught up in our own mind and analyze and overanalyze, or go, okay, there's a different way to do this, or jump from one thing to another. But what you're talking about is really, it's more of an energy management than even a time management thing, because
right.
I think as entrepreneurs, what happens, the first thing we do out of the gate is okay, I've got all these hours that, in the day now. And so then we do little things here and there. And then we find out that it's now 11 o'clock at night and we're still not done, because we've been told exactly what you just said. If you're going to be successful, it's hard work. But it takes work. It takes effort. It takes action.
Of course.
But you're right. It doesn't have to be hard work or difficult. I think there's a learning curve. There's always going to be a learning curve. Yeah. So what would you say to people that are, let's say, starting out, somebody that's starting a business and they're brand new to it and they're like, look, okay, I don't want to get caught in this trap. I'm doing it because I want the freedom. I mean, so often you hear, especially in the online world, build a freedom-based business, right? You get your time back, all this kind of stuff. But most people come into that and they start a business and then they realize that they are working 15, 16, 17-hour days. Yeah. So what's the first thing? If you were to talk with somebody and say, look, you're going to start a business, or you're in a business, but you're working 15-hour days, it's not working. Here's how we're going to streamline this.
Yeah. In that exact scenario, I mean, the very first thing is that the reason why you're doing that is what we already talked about. But secondly to that, if you just think structure-wise, you have no clear hours of operation. And so because you can work anytime, you are working anytime. But again, you probably didn't get into business so that your whole life could be your business. You got into business so the theory is one day, if I build a big enough business, I could have freedom. So many people, want to give up so much. So one day we can have the freedom. What I would challenge the thought process is could you begin to create some hours of operation that allowed you, that said, hey, I'm going to work between X and X, or it could be multiple pockets of your day. It doesn't matter. And these are my primary things I actually need to get done in that time. And is it Parkinson's law? Maybe, I don't know, whatever one says that however much time you have given in a day to get the task done, it'll take that long.
Yeah.
Is that the one?
I think that is Parkinson's. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and we all know this because we've all done it, where we're about to go on vacation tomorrow and we just crush the to-do list.
Yep.
So it's not that it's not capable to us. It's that if I give myself all day to get blankety blank done, then
it takes
then
all day.
It's going to take all day.
Yeah.
But if I give myself these windows, so that would be one thing, is clear hours of operation. And then, secondly to it, depends on the nature of the business, but a lot of these people that are doing 15, 16 hours, assuming you're in a business that has, where you're interacting with clients, customers, stuff like that, is just you right from the beginning. I would have changed this for myself because it took me a while to learn this, but right from the beginning is that we teach people how to treat us. So if you believe that you always have to be, the go-to gal, the go-to guy, that the minute someone calls, I got to pick it up, stuff like that, you are going to create your own personal prison in your business. And that could be just clients, customers, with teammates even too. And so again, I guess this goes back to this idea of hours of operation, but just when am I working? When am I not? And a lot of the guilt that people suffer is because we do not delineate the two. We don't create these clear marks of when I am and when I'm not. So because I don't create the clear boundaries of it, then when I'm not working, I've got this guilt of feeling like I should. But then when I'm working 14, 15, 12 hours a day, whatever it is, and I'm not with my family, I'm ignoring my spouse, I'm ignoring my kids, then I've got the guilt of that I'm not spending enough time with them. The problem is neither of the two things, that you're not working enough or you're working too much. The problem is you haven't created clear boundaries and made it workable in your life.
So you get caught in this guilt cycle, self-perpetuating cycle of just guilt.
100%. Yeah. Yep.
Interesting. And I think you're so right on that, is having those boundaries, because what I've also witnessed is that you can set a deadline and say, okay, look, I've got to get this done in X amount of hours. Or, for me early on, I had to give myself a time frame and say, okay, this is due by such and such time. Nobody was asking for it, but it was me, just so that I could say, and I had to link a reward to it. It was like, if I get this done, I can go mountain biking, or I can, and I have time to go do that. So it would help me kind of just set up that structure for myself, because I found myself doing exactly what you were saying earlier. It was like, I was doing all these other, I can go do this now. And then, I've got some freedom, but really I wasn't being productive.
Yeah.
And certainly not financially productive. It was like, I was just doing busy work. That's what it was.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. I've done a lot of that for sure. Yeah.
But you know what? I think a lot of people hide behind that. I think I did for initially, because I wasn't quite sure how I wanted to approach my business. And I wasn't quite sure I was doing what you were initially doing, and that I wasn't getting into the, how do I want to feel about this business? I'm so burned out and I'm tired of managing people, and I want my freedom. Right. I've raised 4 kids. I've managed a team. I want some freedom and breathing space. But then it was like, okay, I have to bring some money in too. So who am I going to go after? So I had to get really clear on that. Yeah. Do you find that that's a part that people struggle with, is maybe the clarity portion?
For sure. And I think the other part we struggle with is that almost every business, especially when we're starting something, right, where it's, dependent on primarily me, right? So you're the one doing the selling, you're the one meeting the clients, whatever it might be. The most important activities business-wise are always the ones that are revenue generating. And we can simplify that pretty straightforward if we're in some kind of service-based business. For the most part, there's only really 2 things that occur. We are either selling our product or service, or we are generating leads that we could sell our product or service to in some way, shape, or form, right? So the revenue generating. But the other reason why we tend to do so much of the other busy work is that the scariest parts of the business are these two things. That's where whether we want to admit it or not, that's where the most emotional resistance is, the most fear is. Again, and this is, within all of us, but primarily because of the idea of approval addiction, where we're so concerned with what other people think about us that we really don't want to face that rejection, even though intellectually we know it's not that bad. Someone
Right.
says, no, I'm not interested. I don't want to buy, take me off the list, whatever. It's really not that bad. We know that. But there's that part of us that is really fearful of that. And so I think that's probably one of the biggest things is we can spend all this time doing peripheral stuff that feels like work. So we can kind of feel good about what we're doing, but it doesn't move the needle.
Yeah. Well, nobody wants to have that reject. And it doesn't matter how many times you say, oh, it's not personal. Don't take it personally. They're
Mm-hmm.
rejecting not you, but the
Mm-hmm.
product or whatever, your service, but it's still like, oh, and I agree with you. I think that's one of the biggest fears. And I think it's also very difficult
Mm-hmm.
to sit down and say, oh man, I've got to be the one to make the calls. I've got to be the one to
Yeah.
go out and do all this stuff. And until you can start doing it and build some momentum,
Yeah.
it is kind of a tough thing
It
to get
is.
after.
Yeah. The other thing too, really quickly, just to interject on this is that,
Yeah.
especially when we're brand new, we usually, whatever we're starting, we're usually not coming in with the absolute skills necessary to succeed at a high level yet. When we're starting a new business of some kind, not always, but most of the time. So there's this element of, we've got the fear of doing that kind of work, but then we've also got, we're probably just not that good yet. So early on, especially early on, I mean, I think it's good to do it continually, but early on, part of our business time, I spoke of revenue generating, but when the very early stages, hopefully part of your actual scheduled working time, and you got to be careful with this because you can spend too much time as avoidance behavior, but is actually getting really great at whatever it is you do, and I mean, man, an hour a day working on your craft and you could become really, I was going to swear, but you can become really friggin' good at what you do just by an hour a day of working on your craft.
I know Brendan Burchard used to say that he went out and gave all sorts of talks for free
Mm,
anywhere at anybody that would listen to him. And he would go out and just say, okay. And he would give a talk. And then that led to repeat engagements for pay and eventually
mm,
higher and higher and higher pay. And it
mm,
was a matter of just going out there and doing it just to get going, just to
mm,
try it. And it's like sales is the same thing. You either go with somebody and you kind of learn it, and then you just keep going on those calls. And
mm,
then I look back at some of my early sales calls and I'm like, what was I thinking? I wouldn't have
for
bought from
sure.
any
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
initially.
Yeah.
So, quick question before we wrap up.
Sure.
You said that you had a gut feeling, you knew what you wanted to do and you knew you weren't doing it and you just kind of kept pushing it off or bearing it.
Hmm.
When you work with people now, are you finding, because you're working with a lot of 6 and 7 figure business owners, right?
Hmm.
And as a high performance coach, are you finding that there are people that are in their business kind of like you? Look, I'm making the money, but
Mm.
man, there is something else that I just really want to do. Or do you find that there are people that are more like, I know I want to do something else, but I have no idea what it is?
The second one. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. If I was to lean one towards the other, it'd be the second one. I was on a call yesterday with a guy that's not a client yet, but I think next week he probably will be. And that was the exact conversation. And he's been doing what he's been doing for a long time, 27 years, successful, makes a lot of money doing it. And he says, I'm a Christian. And so I pray every day. And my wife and I have been praying and just say, hey, Lord, show me what I'm supposed to be doing. And so that was kind of the starting of the conversation. And I said, okay, that sounds good. And I said, what would you like to be doing? And he goes, I have no idea. No idea. And then as the conversation progressed, it led to, I think I actually just want to keep growing what I'm doing and then see what happens, which is totally fine. But to answer your question, I think it's probably more that other thing. But then secondly, too, we're all operating at different levels. We're all at different places in our lives. I think there's a lot of people that have built successful careers, not just business people, but they built successful careers. There's an element to a lot of people that is not even yet recognized. It's not everyone, right? Absolutely. There's people doing what they're meant to be doing. there is an element to people that for many, they haven't even recognized that just something feels off. And I really believe that often that something that feels off is we haven't found perhaps what we feel we're really meant to do with our lives. Not always, but
Yeah.
but I think it's there. Yeah.
That there's something else calling us, but we can't quite identify it.
Yeah, and we may not even know that something else is calling us, but there's just an offness, right? It's just I just don't um yeah, there's an offness. The other thing, part two to that too, if I could say, no matter who that we are, there's so many different ways to answer a calling. I knew very clearly what I was meant to be doing, but that's not always the case. But usually, this idea of a calling is if you talk to anyone that's ever found it, as you know in your own life, you talk to anyone that's ever found it, no matter what they tell you, and no matter what they say they want to do or how they want to do it, it always ends with the same thing of wanting to impact and help people.
Yeah.
Always.
Yep. 100%.
Always. So sometimes I think too, we can lose that fire, we can lose that drive, we can lose that passion in whatever we do. Sometimes it may require a shift in whatever we're doing, business wise. We might say, well, it's time to do something entirely different. But other times too, though, it's time to reconnect with the actual purpose and reason behind doing what you do. Why, how are you able to impact and make a difference in what it is you already do? So anyways, that's a long answer to your question.
No, but I love that because I think you're hitting on something that's so important, and that is it's the whole thing about grow where you're planted, right? So
Mm.
if you don't know what it is that you want to do,
Mhm.
then it's being able to say, okay, look, and I believe a lot of us feel something at some point. We feel that there is something else that we want to go towards, but we don't know always how to get there. And sometimes it's just a matter of we're afraid that belief isn't there and we just keep shoving it aside. And I've seen that frequently. But
Yeah.
I think it's so important to just say, okay, look, if you start where you're at and what you're saying is, how can you help the most people here and have an impact within the environment that you're in now? Because whether it's that's going to turn around and give you more joy in your life, or it's going to open the door to some other possibilities
Yeah.
that all of a sudden now you say, oh, okay, this has come up now.
Yeah.
And I just think that's so important because I think it's easy
Yeah.
to say, I'm not happy here. I'm going to go over here
Right.
instead
Yeah.
of saying, how can I change it?
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I think the other thing too, to circle back to a lot of what we talked about, and I'm curious if you found this, if you can identify, even if you're unclear, maybe you are unhappy with what's going on, but you could actually identify how is it that I'm wanting to feel day to day? What is it I'm wanting to experience emotionally day to day? And then you work on doing that now, whether you change your external circumstances or not. But then you do that. I think what you were saying earlier too, Kim, is that a lot of those doors then begin to open naturally too, right? We get
Mhm.
out of that what's wrong kind of mentality, and instead we're into that appreciation and love for life today. And I think when you can do that, whether it's the universe guiding you, source, God, whatever you want to call that, your higher self, that just by accessing that, you begin to create some pretty wonderful opportunities.
Well, and that's the key too, is that you start to create those opportunities because I think so often we hear so much law of attraction and think about it and put it on your vision board and all that kind of stuff. But the truth is, there is an action part, and that action may not be the physical, okay, pick up the phone. It
Mm,
could be as simple as what you just said.
mm,
Get into that space of what do I want to experience and how do I want to feel with this? Because just by doing that, you're putting yourself into a mental state that does start to open the door for other things. And it does
totally.
happen. I mean, I've seen this in my own life. I just interviewed an Olympic athlete who was saying that, she's retired, but at the same time, she was like, okay, well, how else can I do what I love doing best? And started kind of just sitting with that, like, I don't know, am I doing the right thing? Am I not? Am I coming back? But this is what I really want. And how do I want to feel on a day to day basis?
Mm,
And all of a sudden, she got a dream opportunity
hmm.
of putting some of her best skills to use in helping other people. And it literally just dropped in her lap. And so you start thinking, okay, there is something to that. It's
Absolutely.
not just like, okay, well, you get to create your own life and la di da da da, when most of us
Right.
are sitting here going, I didn't create this mess or whatever. And then, the truth is, you might have created it somehow, some way.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's hard, right? Because real responsibility is, like, we could probably sum it up that I am responsible for the good, the bad, the ugly, the all of it, right? And we don't often want to take that. But when we do, what a great place to reclaim your personal power.
I love that. Absolutely true. The buck
Yeah.
stops with me, and now I can reclaim my personal power. Before
Yeah.
we end, I just want to touch on
Sure.
the book, because
Sure.
I know you are in the middle of writing a book.
Yes.
And when do you expect that to be finished and coming out?
July 18th. That's my birthday. So that's how I'm releasing it. Yeah. Yeah.
Good for you. You're going to put it on Amazon, self-published?
Amazon. Yeah. It'll be on Amazon, self-published. So the book's called It's Your Life to Live. And it's really, really simply, it's the title's pretty self-explanatory, but it's really about helping you design that life that you want to live and helping you break through whatever some of those usually mental barriers are from you stepping into it. So I share a bit of my own kind of story, which you heard a little bit of today, but share some of that and then break into, I wanted it to be both, yes, inspiring, but also very tactical as well too, so that you have things that you can apply and do to help you move into your life. And, ultimately for all of us, no matter how old we are, how young we are, whatever, none of us know how much time's left in this life. Hopefully it's lots, but we don't know. Whatever it is, though, we can be very intentional about living the life that we really want to. And so that's really what the book's designed to do, is help you do that.
I love that. Your life to live, from someone who's built multiple businesses, successful businesses, and a high performance coach. So thank you. We will put that down below when it comes out. We'll put the link to that. We can add it in. In the meantime, we'll put the other links and how people can reach out to you if they want to get a hold of you. And then you also have a podcast too, so we'll link that down below as well. Ben, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate it. And just kind of walking us through not only your story, but some of the things that we can take to make those changes in our life so that we can create what we really want to create and enjoy.
Thank you, Kim. I really appreciate you having me. I love the work that you're doing.
Thanks.
It's just great to be together.
Yeah. Thanks so much for tuning in today. If you like what you hear, please consider leaving a rating and hit that subscribe button. And if you know someone who would benefit from this episode, please share it with them. I'll be back again next week with another episode of Shift or Get Off the Pot.